Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Can't Be Bothered podcast. And we are joined by a special guest. Abby, take it away. Who do we have with us today?
Yeah, we are joined by our dear friend Caitlin.
Woo woo.
Hello, Caitlin, and welcome to Can't Be Bothered.
Thanks.
Yeah, so excited to have you here. I was just saying that I think this has been a long time coming, so
Yep.
such a treat to have you join us. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I'm Caitlin, and I'm coming at you from Mississauga territory. I am a white queer Jew. I am a Scorpio sun, Cancer rising, Pisces moon.
Tell them.
Will do. Yeah, 5 Scorpio placements.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a mediator by trade, and I'm an educator, and I'm also a psychotherapist.
Just a boss.
Fun
Yeah,
stuff.
you wear many hats.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
love all of my hats.
Yeah, they
Sometimes
all
it's
look
the
good on
same
you.
hat too, you know.
All hats look good on you, like Abby said, and we are so happy to have you on here, not only because you're just hilarious and we love your energy, but also just some of your perspectives that you're bringing to the conversation today. We're really lucky and spoiled to have you. So as you guys can probably tell by the caption, we're going to be talking about when reality and reality TV and therapy meet. This is kind of a bit of a small topic. We don't see it all the time on reality TV, but when we do, it's definitely controversial, a little bit juicy, confusing, not really sure how to feel about it. I'm having flashbacks to Jax. His like weird, uncomfortable therapy situation in Vanderpump Rules. It's just like crossing my mind and I want it to go away.
Oh
So
my
I'm
gosh.
I'm really excited to hear what Caitlin you have to bring to the conversation. But before we do that, I would love to hear sort of your investment in reality TV because you are a fellow Bravo lover.
I'm heavily invested. Yeah, I have watched, I think, every episode of every franchise in North America.
Yeah.
Like everyone, like down to like DC and like
Dang.
Dallas, Vancouver, Toronto, like some of the smaller ones.
Mhm.
Dallas
Wow.
is really good also.
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't seen it, right?
Dallas, you would love Dallas. It's good. Yeah, it's messy as hell.
Yeah.
I haven't watched Miami though, because like all of the other ones I've watched since their beginning. Like I've been watching for like over
Yeah.
a decade.
Yeah.
But Miami, like my little sister showed up mix, was like, you have to watch Miami. She's like harassing me, like lovingly
Mhm.
harassing me about it. But I've been so busy lately, I haven't like had the time to start from the beginning.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not like I'm just like picking it up as it comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, gotta get on
Wow.
Miami.
I'm
I've seen some
so
of it.
surprised.
I know. I am disappointed in myself.
It's interesting too because from what you've also told me, you watch like Bravo adjacent stuff too. Like
Oh yeah.
you watch just anything and everything that there is to watch.
Yeah.
Reality
I
TV.
love Summer House. I love Winter House. I love Southern
Nice.
Charm. I love
Yeah.
Vanderpump Rules. I love it all.
Nice.
I've also watched some Below Deck, but that's like again something that I haven't really like gotten into fully.
It's fine.
Yeah.
We'll
But I
forgive
did watch
you.
it, liked it. Thank you so much. But yeah, I'm like I like as a mediator,
Mhm.
I'm and my strong suit is conflict analysis,
Mm.
and I love doing it. So it's just like it's endlessly stimulating for me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Also, it is hilarious. And I don't know, it's like so far from my own experience, I think in like femininity in a
Mhm.
lot of ways. And I'm just like, I'm kind of like a spectator, as many of us are.
Mhm.
And I like just it's like it is the background of my life. Like if I'm puttering around the house or like doing kind of like work that I don't need to be like listening to something to, I
Mhm.
have my headphones on and I'm watching something from Brava.
Yeah.
It is the it is the soundtrack of my life, the background.
I was
Has
just
a way of
literally-
getting under your skin.
Yeah, it's in there. It's deep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
amazing.
And for our listeners, like, so these two for years were telling me to watch reality TV, get into the Housewives, and I resisted, as I do resist, and eventually broke.
Never.
And I've never looked back. So I really have to give a huge shout out to these two for encouraging me and involving me, because it's been a game changer.
What was the first one you watched?
I think the first one I watched was OC,
Mm-hmm.
followed by New York, because New York is, I know, one of your favorites, and you really hyped it up for me. So
New York is the best one for me. It is my Roman Empire. It is my everything.
wow.
Yeah.
Everything.
It's everything.
Literally.
And yeah, same, like, for that was a huge reason why Caitlin and I bonded at first. Like, we had met a little bit before Abby got married, and at Abby's wedding we just kind of didn't really stop talking about Real Housewives. So and as we've sort of mentioned throughout this podcast too, like, reality TV has really bonded us to other people, other women. It's a good way to connect with each other about something and sort of talk about how we relate to it. So I see
Yeah.
it as really a great way to meet other women and other people. So that just shout out to reality TV for bringing us all together.
Yeah. Thank you, Bravo, and the Bravoverse and Andy.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So as a psychotherapist, I just was wondering if you think it's common for therapists to watch reality TV, sort of in a way that you connect to it too.
I don't know. I think the psychotherapists that I know don't, because it's definitely come up, like, from me.
Yeah. Of course.
But yeah, like, I think a couple of people when I was doing my master's were into it, but it hasn't, yeah, I don't know. But like, therapists are people, and people love Bravo sometimes. Yeah, I'm not sure really. I don't know.
Yeah, I found it, obviously I'm not a therapist, but just working in kind of the helping and service sector, like, I know that's something Anna and I, we've talked about, is just
Yeah.
hearing that it is really common, just as a way to kind of escape and put your feet back and sort of be an observer, where that like that, I guess you have more choice of how much you want to analyze and assess,
Yeah.
where it's not like, part of your job. So you get to still enjoy what you're
Yeah.
interested in, but you don't have to wear that hat as firmly.
Mhm.
So
I
I
feel
don't
like
know.
I need to like ask my therapist if they've watched
Yeah.
Real Housewives. I doubt it, but
Yeah.
My therapist does, and I have to say it was really something that helped me feel closer to her. We don't really reference it during my sessions, but whenever I talk about, coping strategies and sort of decompressing at the end of the day, like, that's part of the language that I can use, that I feel like it's safe for me to say, and it's not passing with judgment.
Yeah.
And it was funny because when I mentioned it in my first session, she was like, I knew I liked you. And it was like just something nice that we could bond over. So
Wow.
definitely ask therapists if they do, because it can really bring you closer.
Did you
MS.
just ask that? Like,
Yeah, I think I did. Yeah.
wow.
I like to ask questions. I'm like, I'm sharing my heart to you. I want to know what your sign is and if you watch reality TV.
that is real. Yeah. That's super real.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
relationship, right? It's give and
Mhm.
exchange.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
that makes a lot of sense. Oh, that's really cool. My most recent therapist is in her 70s, so I don't think she's a viewer, but
Fair
you
enough.
never know.
It's never too late. I mean, she contains multitudes,
Yeah,
and maybe
it's true.
she can get down with a housewife or two.
You never know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
truly.
so true.
So just to sort of provide a framework to our conversation, I would love to get your thoughts around consent and ethical considerations when talking about therapy and reality TV. So take it away.
Yeah. Kind of the ultimate question.
Yeah, I mean, I think like, and for all of the examples of therapy on Housewives and any other reality TV, like, every state or province or country or whatever has like different regulations. So just saying that, right? But like, there would have to be so many check marks. So if I had a client came to me and was like, I am going to be on reality television and I would like for us to show some of one of our sessions.
Yeah.
I would have to check with PHIPAA and FIPPA. I'd have to check with the College of Registered Psychotherapists of Ontario. I'd have to check with CCPA. I'd have to check with my private practice. I'd have to check with my supervisor. Like there's so many, just like as a start, like there's so many responsibilities that therapists hold because personal information is precious.
Mm-hmm.
Consent is mandatory and also precious. And like therapists have such a responsibility to be thorough with like all of the different accreditation bodies that they like practice through.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also like with that, there would have to be conversations around consent and like really big conversations and ongoing ones. So I kind of like imagined again, it's like, okay, I have a client, my client's coming to me. I would need to like, of course, be in the clear with all my regulators.
Mm-hmm.
I know that provincial and federal health acts, all that stuff. But I came up with a list of questions that like I think I would ask my client to like really understand like what's up, right?
Yeah,
I
so
love
thorough.
Thanks so much. Well, the first one is like, how do you feel not knowing who is going to be watching this?
Wow, that's a great question.
Like on its own, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and I kind of like imagine, I think a lot of either the producers or the characters or both want to show parts of a session or a summary or whatever to like communicate something that they feel that they need to articulate. And maybe like in a kind of a setting that promotes or like asks for empathy, you know, which is real, right? Like when I think of those moments, it's like the character is kind of trying to get at something, like trying to connect something or identify a theme
Right.
or articulate something, right? And so like the other question I think is, what's off limits? Like that would have to be a question because unless that person is steering the conversation, which often happens in therapy, right? I'm just there, you know, to do other stuff.
Yeah.
But like I would never want to bring something up that we've talked about in another session if we're making connections between what we're talking about now and what we're talking about 2 sessions ago, right?
Yeah.
I think also like asking like, where did this come from? Right? So like I want to talk about vulnerability. I want to talk about consent. I want to assess that with the client, like together with the client. Was this your idea? Was this suggested to you? Like where did this come from? And like what purpose does it serve for you? And like what's harmful and what's helpful about sharing this on TV? Like how would this benefit you? And how might it harm you? And like how do we mitigate risk?
Yeah.
So for example, like is it in your contract? And do the producers know and does the film crew know that like if at any point you're like I'm not into this, that's it? Is that in writing? Is that agreed to? Like this consent is ongoing, right? At any moment someone can withdraw their consent. And like what kind of aftercare do they need? I think it's a big one too.
Yeah.
I don't know.
One that I imagine gets missed a lot.
Yeah, there's just so many things. And like I'm really, you know, I feel I care about my clients. I feel protective of their right to confidentiality and their right to consent and all that stuff. And yeah, I'm just like, there would have to just be so many conversations around that for me, I think, as someone in relationship with my client.
Yeah.
And also like who has responsibilities around consent and confidentiality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's, one of the things that's worth saying too is just because someone is licensed, just because someone has a certain title or certain qualifications does not, unfortunately, make them ethical and make them considerate of those things.
Mhm.
So definitely big shout out to you for having that empathy and that consideration and really seeing the whole picture. And I think that's a great way to lead. And you would hope that everyone else in that position would lead that way. But unfortunately, it's not necessarily the case.
Yeah. I mean, I would hope so. And also like, I'm client centered. I don't know what the opposite of that is, or the other thing, I guess therapist centered, but like client centered, just like you guys were supposed to laugh.
That you're client centered?
No, the what if
The
you're not
opposite?
client centered, then you're therapist centered.
Ha ha ha, laugh
I'm just kidding.
trapping.
JK, no shade. But yeah, like, yeah.
Because you're sort of posing some questions that you would say to a client. And I kind of want to flip that the other way around, where would you do it if a client were to ask you, and what would be your limits to just saying no?
If I was allowed to do it,
Yeah.
and I had everyone's blessing and I had everything in line and I was doing everything like as a way, like I was reducing harm along the way.
Yeah.
And it was going along with the client's wishes, and we had an aftercare plan and we had everything all in writing, and yes, hell yeah.
Amazing.
If a client wanted to do that, like of course I would do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I wonder, like, would there be any circumstances for you that you would say, okay, even though this person's wanting me to do this, but I'm not feeling like this is aligned to what we're sort of working on? Is that up to you as like a psychotherapist to make that judgment call, or no?
I don't know. Again, I think it would like if I had like concerns about it or anything like that, it would be a conversation.
Yeah.
But the other thing too is like with consent, like if it happened, if we recorded it or whatever, the client was like, this feels great, but then we watched it and the client was like, never mind, I'd be like, okay. I don't know, like I didn't like call all of these regulators to be like, let's say we have a hypothetical conversation. I'm going on a podcast next week.
Yeah.
But I think like I think if we did everything to like mitigate risk and we were practicing consent and confidentiality while also televising a therapy session.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I think like I would do whatever I could to help my clients do something that felt good for them, while also just having conversations within our therapeutic relationship about like what does this mean to them. And
that's very cool.
That's happening in the context of relationship. And even those questions that you would ask to do the prep work, that might even take a couple sessions, to get to that point and to be able to talk openly about everything. So there's obviously a benefit for, or you're focused on the benefit for your client. What about for you as a therapist? Like, what would it mean to you, or what would you gain from being on the show?
I mean, I don't know. Like, it's weird because I would gain an experience, a wild experience of like going through navigating some pretty tricky stuff to do this with my client.
Yeah.
I would think I would learn a lot.
Yeah.
And also like I think the only thing that really icks me out is me being on TV. Like because I do have curiosity about therapists that go on TV and life coaches and like whatever. Those kinds of folks, healers.
Spiritual healers,
Healing.
the wellness healers.
Yeah, we're healing.
Because I'm like, what? Like, does their business change? Is it promotion for them? Like, I think that's something that feels really sticky for me because I think I would then feel like I was taking advantage of my client
Yeah.
as like a commercial, and I don't want to do that. Like I think that that's like also a really big sticking point for me. I don't know, it's tough. It's a tough one.
Yeah.
I would have to talk to my therapist about it. I have to talk to the supervisor. I'd have to talk to the owner of my private practice. I'd have to do a lot of things.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think like some of the motivations that you're identifying, that as a viewer that's not a psychotherapist, and I think somebody that's also participating in therapy, like I can kind of like feel it through the screen when it feels inauthentic, it feels a little icky, and it
Yeah.
feels like a little disingenuous to, you know, what it could be. But at the same time, I also do really love the window of opportunity for vulnerability. I love the window of opportunity for showing what therapy can look like for people who aren't in therapy, and they get to like see it with people that they really look up to, and they can be role models. But yeah, it's like I have a hard time wrapping my head around any kind of instance where that is completely done with like all of these things that you're sort of saying that's being considered. I haven't seen it yet, personally.
Yeah, and like we don't know, right? We don't know
Yeah.
all the things. And also like I think there's room for being creative and being like, okay, if we're not going to televise this for whatever reason,
Mm-hmm.
can we work on something in session together where you feel like you can have the language?
Yeah.
Where you feel like, can we create a situation for you where you're in a space where you can have this conversation with this person? Like,
Right.
how can we kind of replicate the safety,
Mm-hmm.
maybe in any small way, of this space?
Yeah.
Or like, can we help you write something so that you don't feel like you have to be in a recorded therapy session to say that thing, you know?
Interesting. Yeah, I love that. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on in the most recent season of Beverly Hills. Are you watching it right now? Are you caught up
Yeah.
already? I figured, but you never know. We see Erica having this moment with her therapist, and what I really liked about that dynamic is it's because it was more her speaking with her therapist, and it wasn't like a group dynamic. It was
Yeah.
just sort of like this private session of her talking about building empathy. And I also think that it was interesting because I could almost tell, and maybe I'm like totally off on this, that they had sort of met as a client therapist relationship to say this is kind of what I want to bring up. And the therapist really knew how to connect that back to what's already been discussed on the show. So it felt like we weren't overstepping in any way.
Yes.
But I personally felt like that was productive. But I'm curious if you had any sort of like instinct thoughts on that.
I don't know. I thought that it allowed people to humanize Erica
Yeah.
in the same way that like those scenes often do for a lot of people,
Yeah,
right?
for
Like I
sure.
remember Bethany going to therapy,
Yeah.
you know, and just yeah, I don't know. I think it's like it affords characters or reality stars, whatever we want to call them, yeah, like a different way of like being understood, because it's not, I find like with reality TV there's like different modes. Now there's like party mode when they're on vacation or whatever, you know, turtle time, all that good stuff. And then there's like, you know, the day after
Yeah.
or the day before where they're like talking about having to have a difficult conversation, or there's like an event, and then you know, like there's like it, you can, it's like it, everything's so predictable with reality TV. But with the like when they go to therapy, it's like it's just focused on them usually, or their relationship, and it fills in the blanks for viewers in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Right.
That's so
Which
true.
I think is interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And one last note about Erica on my end. I feel like personally, I feel like Erica was done so dirty on the show, and I think was really rung through the ringer. And I think for people who maybe were still having difficulties sort of having empathy for her and connecting her story to where she is now, I think it was really important for the audience to have that moment of her sort of like reckoning with a lot of anger that she still holds and trying to let go of that. Like, I think that that's all completely fair. I think maybe there were some viewers that just really put her on this like pedestal that she needed to apologize and just be forever, you know, indebted to this group of women, which I didn't feel like. So I think it just really solidified to me that she's obviously a human being, and it was just, I think, a really important opportunity on the show. So hats off to you, Erica.
I think that I love you, Erica. I think that that is like the thing, right? Is like
Yeah.
she couldn't have had that conversation with the other women
Yeah.
in the group because of all of the conflict that they had before and the
Yeah.
judgment that she feels, you know. And so it's like, okay, she's like, I want to tell my story. I can do that with this person who is my therapist.
Yeah.
And it's like it's just focused on me. You know, I get to like fill in the blanks. Like that's it's like it serves like a particular purpose in the narrative of the character.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very useful in its own way, regardless of it being, like nice and sort of like finishing off the character, I guess, in our mind of like it's kind of closing the
Mhm.
loop. It's also like helpful in sort of solidifying a certain storyline, which is
Yeah.
also, I think, an angle that production can take, which is like, is that disingenuous? But like we could literally just go back and forth on that the whole time.
Totally. I think also this like idea of like yeah, like the loop and like having a picture of someone.
Mhm.
I've been to therapy for yeah, I've had a couple of stints in therapy with different therapists. I love my current therapist. She's so wonderful. Um and like when I think about how the fuck would I distill like a year's worth of therapy in like a small clip to like tell
Yeah.
a story about myself.
Yeah.
Clip,
Flip.
clip, clip. Like how
Yeah.
I don't know how because like context matters and like
Oh, yeah.
stories, like someone's stories
Yeah.
matter, you know, and like the narrative. I do narrative therapy. Like I'm like all into narratives.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah.
y'all like how would you do that? Like
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Please, Anna.
No, I mean, I feel like, and that kind of reminds me of something that you had mentioned earlier around like what examples do we bring up? What don't we bring up when having conversations? Because to
mm,
me, everything is connected to everything. So it'd be so
yes.
difficult to be like, okay, hear you on that. I want to say that this is related to your family dynamics, but I
Yes,
can't.
yes, for sure, for
So
sure.
like, yeah, that would be so difficult, and like that would have to be a lot of prep, like you were saying, to prepare for
Yeah.
that. And I don't think you could. I think it's always going to feel like a little bit of a performance, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, and that's that like
Capricorns are like deflecting from the question.
but that's that like ongoing consent piece, right? Like if we're in a session and we're recording
Yeah.
and I like bring something and you like forgot that that was off limits,
Right.
then we cancel. Like
Yeah.
that's the ongoing piece.
Right. Yep. For sure. What are your thoughts, Abby?
I Yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting, like the way everyone summarizes their experiences and thinks about it, and even the ways that they, like different things have different meaning to all of us, right?
Mhm.
And I've never really thought of it that way as like a narration of my experience. I feel kind of similar to you. Like I've had a few different stints with therapy, and it's all been like chopped up into pretty specific. I'm like reactionary. Like I'll let it get to the point where it gets so bad, and then I'm like, okay, god damn it, like I'll just do
I've got to
a
make a
couple
bad phone call.
sessions.
Yep.
And I usually don't last more than a few sessions in therapy. Like that's the client that I am. Like I'll
Yeah.
show up, I'll do my business, and then I'll leave until the next time that it gets really bad.
Yep.
So it's
Hey,
kind of
everyone's
hard
got
to,
their style, you know, we're all
yeah,
doing it.
but you know, it's hard to kind of summarize. And I feel like when we see it on reality TV, you're right, it is watered down into like those short little clips, right? And so it's hard to really, people are going to attach their own meanings onto that
Mm.
might be very different than the broader session or the broader work that someone's doing with their
Totally.
therapist.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think on the show we see, we see some more formal therapy sessions. You go into their office, you're doing the thing. But we also see a lot of like spiritual healing, and that's kind of a big trend we're seeing.
It's pronounced healing.
So my bad.
No,
It's spiritual healing.
I'm healing.
Healing.
Need to heal.
Everybody's on their healing journey, and we see a lot of different degrees of helping professionals and healers who come onto the show in different capacities. So, where does that all fall into the mix for you as someone who is a therapist and you're watching this healing work happen in different capacities
Yeah.
at different levels?
I don't know. I mean, like, whatever, if someone like resonates with something, like, I love that for them. Love that for you.
Yeah.
And I think just as a person, as a viewer, not as a therapist, just being Caitlin here.
Yeah.
I just feel I feel like there's just so much, how am I going to describe this? Because, like, the Real Housewives, they're affluent women.
Yep.
Obvi. Not all of them are white. And also, there is a lot of like mismatch of like cultural healing practices that maybe don't belong to those women. And like, I understand that people engage in that stuff all the time, and people are out here making choices, and I also think that people need to engage with those things responsibly and find things that they feel connected to in order to heal, to feel well and feel less alone, and feel resourced and feel calm and cared for. Yeah. And I think but the retreats are also advertisements, right? Like, for those spas and stuff like that. And I just have like a lot of reverence for the people who lead those spiritual journeys for the housewives, and also like really deep curiosity, like how they feel about some of their maybe traditional cultural practices or spiritual practices being consumed on television. Yeah.
Because it's not happening in the container that you would have when you are working with someone and have that relationship with them, or you're in your own space. It's broadcast to anyone, right?
Yeah.
And so, people are going to make their own interpretations and not be able to have all that broader context like you talked about earlier.
Yeah, and people can engage in spiritual practices that aren't theirs. Like, but I think it requires reverence and negotiation and consent and like gratitude. And you don't always see that when that's happening. And again, like, we don't see a lot, right? But I think like this idea of healing on Real Housewives, it's like therapy, it's like white wellness culture. It's like traditional knowledge that's being accessed by people. It is like therapeutic conversations that like aren't therapy, but they're therapeutic, right? It's life coaching, life coaching is like huge on reality TV.
Yeah, big time. I'm trying to think on Real Housewives if we've seen any coaches on the show.
Oh yeah, so many. Let me see.
I'm trying to think, because I'm a coach, right? But I also coach in what my background and what my career has been in.
Okay.
With coaching, it's
sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, it's entirely unregulated, right?
It is unregulated. Yeah.
Entirely. Yeah. There's no oversight. There's no, right?
Right.
But I was trying, good point. Yeah. I was trying to think though. I don't remember a time, but I also haven't seen nearly as much Housewives as you have, Caitlin.
Well, I think that there's, I would go on a limb and say that there's a life coach in every franchise. Sheree Whitfield's life coach, I remember really clearly.
Okay.
From Atlanta, and Teddy is a life coach. She's an
Oh, I
accountability
didn't know
coach.
that. Oh
Teddy
Oh,
yeah.
Bellingham.
she's an accountability coach. That's
Oh yeah. I
right.
totally forgot about that.
Teddy.
Yeah.
Oh
But
my
there's-
goodness.
I'm like having a hard time
No,
recalling all of
you're
them.
right. We saw a lot of Teddy doing her work, and they would like show some of her
Yeah.
texts, right? And
Yeah.
if there's no regulation, like
Yeah.
we don't know if there was ever consent to have, what that looked like.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I've definitely seen one at least. I cannot tell you who it was, but I do remember. Oh, was it on Real Housewives of Atlanta, the most recent season? What's her name? Starts with an M. And she has a life coach with her two nephews that she takes care of.
I
Oh,
haven't
Marla.
seen Atlanta.
Marlo.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she
Yeah.
yeah, I have seen it before, but I never even thought about like the regulation standpoint
Yeah.
of that being an implication on. Yeah, that is so
But
interesting.
that like the stuff that Marlo does is therapeutic.
Yeah,
Like
it
with her
is.
life coach.
Yeah.
It is healing. Like, and like, but also as a therapist, I can coach. Like it sometimes therapy takes that turn where a client's like, I need help figuring out what I'm going to say in this conversation. I'm like, all right, like,
It's
but
a
I'm
tool.
not going to lead the way with coaching, but sometimes it comes in.
Absolutely. Yeah, I could totally see that. And I can see that being really useful in this type of context for TV because it is more like short-lived. It's not this like bigger connection, although it can be, I'm sure, but like I could see it kind of being tactful and like, okay, so when you see this bitch, you're gonna say this. Like I can totally see that being a full like production standpoint.
This bitch in particular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were talking about the like therapy versus a therapeutic conversation. What did you mean by that?
I don't know. I think like we have therapeutic conversations all the time when we're like not in therapy. Yeah, where we might feel vulnerable, we might feel challenged, we might understand ourselves a little bit better, we might understand someone else a little bit better. Sorry, I mean like therapeutic, yeah, just as in like healing, right? Or like helpful, or like helpful like relationally.
Hannah's dying over there.
I can't handle every time you say it.
Healing,
but
so
also
casual.
like I'm kind of like, because like whenever I watch every fucking time, whenever I watch a clip of reality like of a Bravo lab going to therapy, I'm like, is this a full session?
Yeah.
Did they record the full session and then you selected the clip? Is this just did you just agree on a script before you went in and it isn't really a session, it's just a real like a conversation with your therapist that's being recorded but not like a session, like
right.
I think therapeutic relationships can happen in so many different contexts outside of therapy. Yeah,
I really relate to that only because I'm not in any way, like I'm not a life coach, I'm not a psychotherapist, I'm none of those things. I am somebody that goes to therapy, but I think for me, like I connect with a lot of the conversations that are had amongst the women on the show, and to me that is therapeutic because I see myself a lot in them, I learn a lot from them.
100%.
And to me, like I think that's why I'm such an engaged audience, is because I really gain something from it. So I'm really glad that you sort of identified that, because I think there is sometimes this internalized thing of like therapy means this, to actually be taking care of myself in this way means all these things, but it's so beyond that. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind in what we were talking about earlier of these like healing retreats and stuff, is like that's amazing that we're sort of like accessing this information. I think gratitude, like you said, is such a great point, is something that I don't see a lot on the show, because we have a whole group of women and people identify with it differently. And so there's some people who are like, I don't want to get this shit over with, and it's like an incredibly like meaningful spiritual practice. And so disappointing to see that type of reaction in a confessional. But I think it also is great to sort of like take our mindset away from this like one-on-one therapy client relationship and more like women talking and crying and screaming and like sort of expressing themselves differently. It's great. That is therapeutic,
I just had a thought come in about do you remember on New Jersey where they did horse like equine therapy? And Trey, like I think Teresa I can't remember if it was Teresa or Melissa, but one of them, like, because the challenge was like you have to be like in your body and in your mind enough to approach the horse,
Yep.
pick up the hoof, scoop the foot out, and then walk away. And I can't remember which one. I think if I'm right, one of them really got freaked out and the other one did a great job. And then that was like just added to their conflict.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm. Yeah.
But like that was like, I don't remember if that was like an equine therapist or if it was like a horse dude who like
I think it was an
horses.
equine therapist.
Yeah, like I can't remember like the like designation of this man.
Yeah.
Just some horse dude.
A rancher.
Just a rancher.
Just your average rancher.
Come scoop out my horse's foot.
Literally. No, I remember that. And I think it might have been Teresa who like wasn't connecting.
Gotta look at it.
But weren't the husbands there too? Like their husbands were doing it too?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. They did pretty well.
I wish Frank Catania was in that season. I don't think he was in that season.
That's so funny.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
there's so many examples. For you, like what other ones?
Oh yeah, Carolyn cried. Family.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was
The
her
episode,
husband.
sorry, the episode's called Horse Whisper to a Scream. So sorry. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay.
That's
Oh my gosh. What season was that?
Season 5, episode 14. Those were the golden days of Ranj. Let me tell you, the Wakilis.
Yeah.
Oh, God bless.
100%. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Yeah.
I just keep thinking about Luann on a camel. Like I know you're talking about horses, but
Or Luann.
That
was scary for her.
Luann.
Oh.
But yeah, there and like Abby was saying, there's so many examples that we've seen over the years, where we, at the very least see therapeutic conversations and like sometimes full on therapy.
Mhm.
One that really comes to mind is Candace, on Real Housewives of
Oh
Potomac
my
and her
God.
mom.
Oh man.
Yeah, wild dynamics there for sure.
Yeah. Because her
Truly.
mom is a therapist.
Yeah.
I have a lot of very strong feelings about that as a non-therapist, but I would love to hear your thoughts on that, Caitlin.
Yeah, that was really difficult to watch. I was really feeling for Candace. And I kept thinking like, you are not going to be able to elicit the conversation that Candace needs while her mother is on camera.
Mm-hmm.
She will not be able to feel safe enough to address causing harm.
Yeah.
Like I was like, why is this happening?
Yeah.
But then some of those thoughts came up for me, but like maybe Candace feels like this needs to be addressed and it's only safe to do so with the support of this other person.
That's a really good point.
Some of those things came up for me, but I was just, like really feeling for Candace. And I was like, I wonder what Candace's mom's clients like would think if they watched. Like my mind was full. So many thoughts. Yeah, just a lot of thoughts about that. What were y'all thinking?
Anna.
Please, Abby, go. I know you have a lot to say.
I'm gonna eat a bag of chips.
Yeah, please. I don't know. I'm not going to dive too deep into it, but basically like it was just really disheartening because I was kind of thinking about if she was my therapist, I would have to fire her. Like I would not be able to continue working with her after that.
Yeah.
And
totally.
like you said at the beginning of the session, therapists are people. Like they're whole humans, right? So they have their own personal lives, they have their own personal relationships. And I think sometimes we put therapists on a pedestal that they are supposed to be perfect, never make mistakes, have all the right things to say, have no conflict with any of their personal relationships. And that's just not the case. Because we also complain when they're like robots and talk in therapy speak all the time. So, we recognize that they're whole humans, but she's just said some things that were really disturbing. I thought you know, for me, that's an example of how someone can be a licensed therapist and be really unethical. I felt really disturbed by the whole thing. And I know it was her as a client and talking to a therapist with her daughter about her personal relationship, but she continues to prop herself up as the expert and assert her authority, or as having a position of authority. And it was just really, really hard to watch.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, I agree with all that, just as a viewer watching it. And I think that was such a good point you made around like, sorry, Alfie's people, you know, like therapists being people outside, but at the same time, it's like I'm hearing you, Caitlin, as like a psychotherapist who, you know, has your psychotherapist hat and your Caitlin hat, and all those two people are very much the same and blended in a lot of ways, but that your values align with those things outside of your office. So I couldn't imagine a space where somebody could, you know, think of all of these things and ethical considerations and just like, you know, have this like understanding and framework and then go into your personal life and that's just completely in the shitter. Like, I just can't imagine where those two things happen, but it does, you know.
Just such a big gap, right?
Yeah, like
Between who you are
huge.
as a therapist with who you are as a person. You would
Yeah.
hope that there wouldn't be, you know, that big of a gap.
Yeah, and like my own values, like I want people who cause harm to be humanized enough to address their behavior
Yeah.
and not feel ostracized and punished so they can't actually work on what's going on for them.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you do that on television.
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
it's like that's so vulnerable and like yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know. It was kind of nuts, not so bonkers to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very difficult to
But
watch.
again, so much we don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what
that,
conversations they had. I don't know who
yeah.
initiated that. I don't know who needed it. I don't know anything.
So I guess just one other example that really popped into my head when I thought about this episode was Whitney. And I know we don't really see her doing much actual therapy in the moment, but we hear her talk about her therapy a lot. And, you know, we've referenced her healing journey. You know, it just seems like something that she brings up at every opportunity that she has.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to a point where I at times felt like she was weaponizing it against other people or almost using it as like an excuse for some kind of bad behavior. You know, I just got the impression that there was like this moral high ground, like, I'm doing my work, so maybe you need to do your work, and then we'll be on the same level. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think I've heard like, you know, when people are like, go to therapy, like, what's wrong with you? Go to therapy. I think that's
Yeah.
so harmful and also like the opposite of what you should be doing. Shame is not an effective motivator, y'all. I think you know that. Yeah. But yeah, I felt similarly about Whitney and Hilling because like I think I don't know. I think just in the way that she talked about her doing something and other people not doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know. My hope is that people can show others the compassion that they try and show themselves.
Yeah.
And so if she's making space for herself, and like understanding how difficult that journey is for her, then I would hope that she could extend that to other people who like might not express that they need a healing journey, but might need it, you know?
That's a really good
Yeah.
point because something that I was going to say about Whitney was it was really interesting because I feel like it was more last season that she was sort of like really going through it with her trauma and her therapy and was really unpacking a lot of stuff. And this season, what's been really interesting is, you know, Heather's been really vulnerable about her, like talking about her religious trauma. And it's been really interesting to see how quick Whitney is to completely undervalue that or just be like, move on, Heather. Like, what do you mean? And I just always, I was like, weren't you making the same argument to Heather last season to make more space for your trauma? Like I just yeah, I think like that's been the most frustrating part because I would have really had a lot more space for Whitney had I seen her sort of like mirror that same empathy to other people in the group that she was sort of hoping for, and maybe had taken that time last year to really learn how to show up for her friends differently based off of how she wanted people to show up for her.
Yeah.
And it just is such a double standard. And to me, it's, yeah, like you were saying, Abby, it's a little selfish.
Yeah, and like some people are just so in their own shit, and that's
Yeah.
real.
Yeah.
You know, they're just so in it.
Yeah.
I get it.
And I feel like that is part of one of the characteristics of what makes somebody really good for reality TV is because they are so self-centered. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of what makes them good on camera and what makes drama sort of happen. Like these people are casted for a very particular reason. So that's something I try to remind myself as well. Like, sorry, Alfie's being wild. Yeah, I just try to remind myself of that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also like people who have survived really difficult things sometimes have a hard time extending compassion towards others, you know, for lots of different reasons, and all of that exists. And yeah, but it is hard to watch that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Mhm.
that's so true. Yeah, but I think you're right, Anna, that, you know, when we think about what makes someone really good for reality TV, like it's all the messiness and all the tough
Oh
conversations
yeah.
and seeing their growth journeys. And, you know, that is one thing that is really positive about what we've seen, is just that kind of bonding of other women and learning and growth from the early seasons to later on. So yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
think the biggest takeaway for me from this whole conversation is like that there's a lot that we don't know. There's a lot that happens in preparation. I didn't even think of all those things that you shared around like Ontario specifically, what that kind of looks like. But yeah, a lot of work has to go into as reality TV does. There's so much behind the scenes that we don't even think about, and a
Yeah.
lot of orchestrating and planning. And this is like one of those things that I'm interested as to like what the motivation was behind producers at Bravo to like want to have that. What if it was coming from a place of like, let's bring some vulnerability into this? I don't know. I think it's more honestly exploitative is sort of my feeling on it.
Do you want, like, if you think about what message you want that to send to the viewers, like what do you hope people watching might take away from it if they're thinking that maybe they want to explore therapy?
I don't know, man. I think like the way I talk about therapy, oh, like a lot of people that I talk to about it have never done it.
Yeah.
Um, it depends on the therapist too, right? Because a lot of different therapists have, yeah, their own approaches or modalities that aren't the same as mine. But I think for me, like, I think what I really like, what comes up time and time again when I'm like reflecting on my work with people is um like building a connection to self, like feeling curious about yourself and showing yourself grace, and like understanding what the story is, what the narrative is that you feel was written for you, and how to maybe fuck with that a little bit. Maybe you can write your own narrative in some ways, and like, yeah, getting to know yourself, and like maybe therapy is a cool way to do that, just with someone to guide you through it. Or maybe you just like want to talk to someone completely out of your life, outside of your life, who, you know, won't have like feelings about what you're saying, Anna.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I think like that would be so valuable for somebody who's in reality TV because there's so many people in social media and audiences and people who say a lot of things about you and fill in a lot of blanks. So to have that time to really reassert so you know who you are and build that connection would be 1000% critical, I think.
100%. Yeah, it could be huge. Yeah, like therapy in a lot of ways is a way for people to like discover parts of themselves or how they feel about parts of themselves and all that stuff. And I think it's really fucking cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love doing it.
Very cool. Well, you are definitely the coolest therapist that I know.
Yeah.
So
Don't even.
Yeah, I'm your biggest fan.
Wow.
Literally.
Listen,
Yeah.
Can't Be Bothered is my favorite podcast.
Uh,
I tell
Thank
so
you.
many people. We had a birthday party for me, and Abby and Anna were there, and I was like a proud mother hen
yeah,
reading
you're
reading the Spotify description of the podcast aloud to the group, and everyone was so impressed.
Mm, you're so sweet. Thank you
So
so
Yeah.
cool that
much.
you're doing this. I'm so happy
Aw.
about it.
We love
Aw.
it. Well, it's such an honor to have you as our first guest on the podcast and, being able to connect with other femmes and have
Yeah.
really in-depth conversations. So thank you so much for joining us, Caitlin.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
we appreciate your time and your wisdom, and looking forward to having you on future episodes of Cunt Be
Oh my
Bothered.
God, what? Yeah. I gotta think of another thing.
I
Oh,
feel like we would
we'll
have
be fine.
endless things to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
All
Okay.
right. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in to this week's episode of Can't Be Bothered. We'll see you next time.
Bye.